morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the DC Cinematic Universe seems to be coming into focus very suddenly and very quickly. And it all started late last week with Nikki Fink's scoop about what was going to be Warner Brothers' big announcement at San Diego Comic-Con, aka Comic-Con International. And it's an entire slate of DC films, which will be kickstarted, of course, in 2016 with Batman v Superman. But the big news was who was getting a movie, and that we were going to be getting 3 movies overall each year from DC Warner Brothers. That's a big order. And as I noted on Friday, it seems to be following a similar game plan from DreamWorks Animation to release 3 films a year, and that hasn't worked out too well for DreamWorks. As you'll see in Movie Math later today, How to Train Your Dragon 2 underperformed. This was supposed to be a sure bet for DreamWorks Animation. And so I think that DC and Warner Brothers should take note. All right, so over the weekend, as I said, we're getting more information. Another element of the DC Cinematic Universe seems to have been revealed, and it makes you wonder if this is just Warner Brothers suddenly unable to keep a secret, which they've been very good at up to this point, or perhaps they're working damage control. Now that Nikki Fink has given away their big reveal, maybe they're trying to leak a few other elements to, maybe they're like, oh, this actually got a big splash, let's keep the conversation going. Or, it's just the rush has begun. They were doing a really good job keeping things under wraps, but now that Nikki Fink is torn away at the corner, it's beginning to all unravel. So the big news was Jason Momoa is apparently going to play Aquaman. Now, everybody has known for quite some time that he's been in talks with DC and Warner Brothers, and on Friday, as I discussed, part of Nikki Fink's story was that what's taking so long to reveal the Warner Brothers plans for the DC Cinematic Universe is casting negotiations. So maybe Jason Momoa was in talks with DC only up until this point, and it leaked because maybe they finally made a deal, because these are multi-picture deals, and they're a little bit difficult to work out because, as a number of people are pointing out, when you sign on for these comic book universes, it's a little bit limiting to what you can do elsewhere in Hollywood, what other movies you can handle in your career because your commitment is so big. But I don't think a lot of people are calling him Jason Momoa, so I don't know what would take his deal so long. So, Aquaman. Well, why do they want Jason Momoa? And you know what? Another interesting element people were talking about over the weekend was that Momoa had said point blank he was not going to be Aquaman, and that he was flattered to hear all the discussion, but that was not the case. So I think, some people seemed annoyed by that. I don't know quite how to feel. I mean, to categorically deny it might have been a mistake, because people will be like, well, you just point blank looked at us and lied. Maybe you could respect Momoa for keeping a secret. Maybe he could have just gone with the old no comment. But maybe he didn't want to jinx it either. But you know what? It worked out. Whatever he did, he is apparently going to be Aquaman. And this is a story being confirmed. It originated at HitFix with Drew McSweeney. Pretty solid source. Again, not one of those sites that just kind of makes things up to get headlines. I think at this point we kind of know who they are. But I think HitFix is not one of them. So Jason Momoa as Aquaman. Now let's first talk about that kind of casting. I have my notes here if you're wondering what I'm looking at. So I think that DC wants him because, of course, he played Khal Drogo on Game of Thrones. But as you might recall, he didn't have much to do in Game of Thrones, but kind of just look like a badass and wear lots of heavy eyeliner and have his way with Daenerys. But I think that that's where Jason Momoa works best, when he doesn't have much to do or say. So I'm very nervous about putting him in a project, a universe of this scope and quality, supposed quality. We'll see. But I just don't feel that Momoa is at the caliber that you would want for this kind of a movie. This seems to me like Joel Schumacher casting, for lack of a better word, or perhaps the perfect word to describe this. I hope Momoa proves me wrong, but I would caution whoever's doing the casting over at Warner Brothers DC that physique is not all that you need. Acting talent, I think, is actually more important, and personality, and you can change the character to match the actor you've cast in it. For instance, I'm very excited about Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. He doesn't physically look like you would take on that role, but this is a unique opportunity for him to redefine it. So the other thing I have a concern with is that, of course, we know another person talking to DC is Dwayne Johnson. And one of the announcements on Friday with the slate of films that they're going to apparently have coming down the pipeline is a Shazam movie in 2016. And people are thinking that Dwayne Johnson might be playing Black Adam, which of course is the villain in that film. So to see Dwayne Johnson as a villain, I don't really know if that's something Dwayne Johnson would do with his career. Maybe he'll give it a shot. Although occasionally Black Adam recently has been redeemed, an anti-hero, fighting on the side of good. A little bit more like Loki. It's like, we're supposed to fight, but when there's a problem that's bigger than us, we come together. But I think that if you have both Dwayne Johnson and Jason Momoa, they're a little bit repetitive. I don't think you need both of them. They have a similar look, a similar physique, and I think that, it dilutes the power of Dwayne Johnson, who I think is a good choice for the DC Cinematic Universe. Some of you might feel, well, he's not that great an actor either. We've been arguing about it over Hercules. Some of you feel that Dwayne Johnson's going to ruin that movie. But I have faith in Dwayne Johnson. I think he's a good actor. He's certainly better than Jason Momoa. And I think with the right role, he could be a good addition to the DC Cinematic Universe. Or he could just make it seem like it's a Fast and Furious movie. We'll see. So let's move on to Aquaman and what apparently his role is going to be. Well, he's going to apparently have a small but crucial appearance in this new Batman v Superman film, because of course it is Dawn of Justice. Justice League, that is. So Aquaman's going to show up, and apparently he's upset about the world engine, as many people have guessed, because one of them, of course, one was over Metropolis, but one was over an ocean. And so Aquaman was like, I guess it looks like I'm going to have to go visit man's world because enough is enough already. Like, what the heck is this? And I think it speaks to the interconnectedness that Kevin Smith pointed out, or, that was his theory. That's how the DC Cinematic Universe is going to work. Whereas in Marvel, in between group films, they kind of retreat to their respective corners. Although, is Batman v Superman a group film? We'll see. But, Aquaman was not somebody who had his own film in this supposed slate that DC and Warner Brothers had put together. So he's only going to appear in this film, then I guess apparently the Justice League movie, or maybe some other movies if these characters are going to hop around a little bit more than at Marvel. Because as I said, between the group films at Marvel, they retreat to their respective corners and they make their individual movies with very few crossovers. Occasionally you'll see a cameo, which we all appreciate and enjoy, but I think it'll be interesting if DC goes the route of every movie is fair game for every character, even no matter who the title is referencing. They might take the lead in the story, but you're going to be seeing our cast of characters in many more than just their solo films. And there maybe won't be solo films. It'll be a little bit more like actual crossovers in comics, which I think is a very interesting decision. So Aquaman will be upset. So that's basically what I have written for this. It's not confirmed, so it's hard to totally theorize about what this is going to mean, but I think it does fall into line with what we're hearing, and I'm just curious to what you guys think about Momoa in this role. A lot of people have really liked what Aquaman has become thanks to the New 52, and I agree that what Jeff Johns did with that character, embracing the ridicule and meeting it head on, has actually reinvigorated the character and made him cooler than ever. But of course, very different look. He's Caucasian in the comics. I'm not against making a change like this. And I may be able to play more into, it makes him a little more Namor-like, though, I feel. If you think about it, Jason Momoa looks more like Namor, which is a Marvel character. But, I always said that you would want to get someone who looked good wet to play the role of Aquaman, and I guess Momoa fits the bill. But whether or not he's just there to be Beefcake remains to be seen. So that's the first story of the day. The second story, speaking of Marvel and doing something different, Tom Hiddleston has landed another role, which I think is a very interesting opportunity for him and could potentially be a game changer for his career. And I think he needs a game changer. He's, of course, extremely popular as Loki, but he really hasn't been able to find success outside of that role. And it's been a long time now. He's been Loki for a while. He's had this very strong fan base. So I'm surprised, and I'm sure he's disappointed, and his team is disappointed, his representation. They haven't been able to spin that into a career that isn't so reliant on whether or not Marvel calls him up. And not just to do a voice in a Tinkerbell movie. So he's done his work for Disney. He's very loyal to the studio, but now it looks like he's going to be starring in a biography of Hank Williams, the original country singer. Of course, a number of you might be familiar with his son, Hank Williams Jr. Both men have led very interesting and tragic lives, and they're both extremely influential in the world of not only country music, but that fan base. So this film is coming together. It's a passion project by producer Mark Abraham. Abraham has produced quite a number of films. His most recent one was RoboCop, I believe. But he has directed before. This will be his second feature after Flash of Genius, which was the Greg Kinnear movie about the man who invented the windshield wiper only to have it stolen from him by one of the big car companies. It's a pretty good movie, if not a little frustrating. It's a great, if you're ever thinking of doing business or negotiating with a big company, go watch Flash of Genius to see what you shouldn't do. But, it was competently directed, so I think Abraham, it's not ridiculous that he would direct this film. He also wrote it. He's written some television. I think this is his first big feature writing gig. And, of course, he's producing his own film. And passion projects are tough. They can usually go either way. They could be... obviously, this guy has, Mark Abraham loves Hank Williams. He makes the best Hank Williams movie ever. Or he's so passionate about it, he's blind to his deficiencies and what he can personally deliver to the project. But anyway, he's going for it, and he signed Tom Hiddleston in the role. Now, I don't want to give away what happens to Hank Williams. You could easily look it up on Wikipedia, but I think it'll make for a very interesting movie and a diverse film. One thing I would like to discuss that you might not be aware of, I certainly wasn't, is that Hank Williams, one of the people who inspired him with his music, was a street performer, Rufus Payne, a black man who Williams ran into when he was also really down on his luck, and so that kind of jazz influence had a big effect on Williams' music, and I think that's great to see that kind of influence in country music, which I think a lot of people might not be familiar with, and should be. So I think it would be great if this movie can do that, and of course it will broaden the audience that maybe will perhaps be interested in hearing the Hank Williams story, if they can, I think, highlight this element. And I'm sure, unless, Mark Abraham is also a producer, he should realize that that's something that should be addressed. Now, some people have said, why is a British actor playing an American icon, Hank Williams, arguably the greatest country singer of all time, or certainly one of them? Well, I would say, well, look, we already have Superman played by a British actor, Henry Cavill, and if someone's right for the role, they're right for the role. And I actually came around to really liking Henry Cavill as Superman. And come on, Tom Hiddleston looks so much like Hank Williams, it's brilliant casting. And for him to be able, if he does his own singing, this could really work out well for him in his career. Now, there have been some other big movies about singers, tragic singers. Hank Williams' story is a tragic one, but it's done very well for those actors. It's really gotten them a lot of attention, but they haven't been able to, again, parlay it into a long-term career. I'm talking about the Buddy Holly story with Gary Busey, and then, of course, La Bamba with Lou Diamond Phillips. Interestingly, both those performers died in the same plane crash, but their stories were told in separate films. But they got a lot of attention for both those actors and made them household names. But again, never been able to really do anything. Never really able to do anything after that. Gary Busey has resurfaced on The Celebrity Apprentice. I think that's his biggest claim to fame these days. And Lou Diamond Phillips mostly works in television. But again, those movies did make a big splash. So I think that there is a history of high-profile projects coming out of this, genre of the music performer biography. We have Get On Up, of course, coming out this year, and a lot of, black musicians have been really the focus of this music bio for the past couple of years, and so it'll be interesting to move back onto country music. There was, of course, Walk the Line, but that became more Reese Witherspoon's vehicle than Joaquin Phoenix's. I believe he was Oscar nominated, but she's the one who won for playing his wife. So we'll see. I think Tom Hiddleston, this is a great career move. It's risky, but he needs to just start trying stuff. If I were him, though, if I were his representation, I would advise him on doing a romance. He has a very strong female fan base. They love watching him as Loki, and I think that a traditional, not like some cheesy rom-com, but a good, solid, maybe like, a Remains of the Day or one of those kinds, maybe a period piece, but a real steamy one. And I think maybe he could get some audience members to come in for that, because right now he's struggling outside of Marvel. And of course, you could always get that Loki movie. Now, speaking of magic, or as Thor would say, science we just don't yet understand, let's move over to Archie Comics, where Sabrina the Teenage Witch apparently is still getting a movie. That was also discussed over the weekend. It was confirmed that Sony is finalizing the script and that they're moving forward with this film. And they're also still planning on making an Archie movie. But the Sabrina one interests me because I think they might be making a mistake. It was confirmed they're going with the traditional, upbeat, girl next door Sabrina version, almost like a teenage Bewitched. And I think that's a mistake considering where films are going these days, and genre filmmaking, on film and television, actually. So, with shows like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, I think that this cute girl next door is just not going to appeal to today's audience. And there's another way they can go that's been established in the comics already with great success. Now, anyone who reads comics, I would urge you to check out what Archie is doing. They really are thinking outside the box over there, and they have some very smart ideas that I think you would be surprised that a company that's been around for so long is willing to try. But it's yielding great results for them, and it's a very exciting time for the company. Of course, they have the Life with Archie, dual storyline, big page magazine, which focuses on all the kids from Riverdale as adults. I think that's a very good story. I was reading it for a long time until it got a little too meta, and then it kind of, knocked me out of, the story out of its believability. But it's still a very good run up until, I guess, the first 20 issues at least, so it's worth checking out. But a recent hit for them has been Afterlife with Archie, their zombie book. Anyone can die and anyone has. But a big crucial character there has been Sabrina. She's the one who kind of accidentally got the whole thing started with these zombies, and she's so well received with this incarnation, this darker, creepier incarnation, that apparently she's getting her own title spin-off of Afterlife with Archie called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which I think sounds phenomenal, and I'll probably be tempted to pick that up. By the way, one of you asked me, am I reading comics digitally now or still, the hard copies? And I've gone digital. It's just easier for me. I can pick them up really quickly off of Comixology without having to go to the store. They're on my very nice light iPad Air, and I actually recommend it. And I wasn't saving comics anyway, and I never thought I would go digital, but now that I have, I really love it, and I highly recommend it. So anyway, back to The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I think this is a great idea, and can you imagine how successful a movie would be about a teenage witch that was of the Carrie variety? I really liked the Carrie remake with Chloe Grace Moretz. I thought it was so well done, and I was disappointed that it didn't do better in theaters. But if Sabrina isn't going to go the direction of a dark teenage witch, perhaps some other studio will be smart enough to figure it out. And Sony's had a lot of success with this kind of, the Halloween aspects. Hotel Transylvania, for animation, that's where they've done quite well with this. They're making a sequel, and then of course they just greenlit Medusa. But I guess those have the very middle of the road family feel, and so that's why they think they should take Sabrina in that route, live action. But I would say no, leave the bright, happy Halloween aspects to the animation, and in live action, go a little darker, bring in that older audience, and I think that they could really do much better than I think they probably will with Sabrina. But we'll see. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But I'm curious to what you guys think. All right, on to the viewer question. This comes from Saifi13 or Saifi13. And Saifi says, "Hi Grace, question. Since superhero movies are huge at the box office, do you think Marvel and or DC will try making more superhero films for adults? Similar to Watchmen and Kick-Ass. P.S. Love the show, huge fan, smiley face." Thank you, Saifi13, and I think you're right on the money here. Literally, because of course there is a lot of money to be made here. However, I would argue that Kick-Ass was not for adults. It had teenage characters, and while it was edgier, it was more in line with what I'm talking about with Sabrina, what I just discussed. Making edgier content for the younger demographic, which makes them maybe feel a little more adult watching it, and that's why maybe it tends to do a little bit better. Although Kick-Ass, never really delivered big box office numbers, and again, why you'll never see a Kick-Ass 3, unfortunately. But I think Watchmen is a very adult a superhero movie, great example. And Watchmen, I really did enjoy parts of it, but it's still frustrating when you consider how much better it could have been if Snyder maybe hadn't deviated from the original story and hadn't, he said he wasn't going to mess with it, but he kind of did. He messed with it just enough to make it not as good as it could have been. But anyway, I think that was a step in the right direction. And I think 300 maybe to some degree is certainly more adult. But let's go over to Marvel, which I think is really leading the charge here. Because I want to talk about specifically Captain America the Winter Soldier, which we all, as we've said many times here now, was a political thriller almost before it was a superhero movie. And as you might recall on Movie Math when I was discussing how that film performed at the box office, it skewed surprisingly old. It had a lot of mostly guys, but older guys, older men over 25, and I think maybe even over 50 might have been the dividing line, if I recall correctly, for who showed up to see this movie. Because it had the war elements. Captain America, of course, fought in World War II, so it's going to appeal to that demographic as well, who enjoys World War II stories, and also that age group and demographic just tends to like political thrillers. So I think that's the answer to your question, Saifi. Appealing to other audiences, older audiences, people who don't usually watch comic book movies, etc. The possibilities are limitless by moving into different genres. Bringing in the audiences there by being like, well, you might not like superhero movies, but you like political thrillers, right? Come check this out. Or you like horror movies, right? Come watch Doctor Strange. I think that's the future of superhero movies, and that's how they're going to diversify and keep things fresh without people feeling, this has run its course. The trend has run its course. How to make it not a trend. So yes, I think adults will be brought in. It's already worked for Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and I'll be interested to see if they can bring in the horror audience with Doctor Strange. And also perhaps you might get an older audience with Ant-Man through casting. That's another great way to broaden your appeal. Michael Douglas, of course, it looks like he's going to have a large role as Hank Pym opposite Paul Rudd's Scott Lang. And Paul Rudd is also older. He's, in his 40s. So having those two guys as the leads in an action movie could again appeal to an older audience. Very interesting things. I think it's interesting what Marvel's playing around with. DC so far is casting younger. Their old experienced guy is Ben Affleck in his 40s. He's supposed to be the older guy, with the little gray at his temples. They're not going, to the level. They have Jeremy Irons as Alfred, but again, not quite what Marvel is doing. But DC, they seem to be, learning quickly. So we'll see what happens, and maybe if they might want to skew older on some role. They maybe needed Gordon for their movies. Maybe they can get someone older that way. But then, of course, they have a very young Gordon over on TV, which they might not want to distract audiences from because they're betting very heavily on Gotham, of course, on Fox's fall. But anyway, that's my answer to your question, Saifi. I'd be curious to know what everybody else thinks. Do you think this is the way to go in terms of diversification and attracting audiences through casting and bringing in other genres to superhero films? Write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question. And I hope to see you tomorrow. And thanks for watching. Bye.